Susan, I might actually start with you. I mentioned that every entrepreneur has a story. And this is, it's these stories that create the ecosystem that we're all part of. So perhaps you could start by just sharing your story. What led you to start working on startups?
Okay, well, I'll start at another point, and I guess I'm one of those people who grew old before they grew up. And so I think that I am born an optimist, and I'm born always looking for a better way of doing things, and sometimes it takes a very broad sort of social thing. So in my CV you see I've contributed to arts and innovation agendas, usually unpaid, usually because I knew I had a really good idea and people should listen to me. But I guess I'm 65 years trying to really bring about gender diversity and gender presence in decision making and in what I see as being a really important social change agenda. So I've moved across from commercial endeavours, and I've been on company boards as a non-executive director and chairman, mainly listed companies, for more than 20 years, so this age thing keeps on coming through. And I guess I've kicked myself upstairs at scale, and so as chairman, Laura's the next generation of energy and endeavour. But I also enjoy the social entrepreneurial thing, which is the big issue and other things that I've done. So it's really not about me as a person, it's really about what I've wanted to do. And so Scale is a startup. We're 3 years old. We are a successful startup, and we're all very proud of what we've achieved, and Lauren and Sarah and some great Wendy angels in the room. So if you want to know more about Scale, please also talk to them. And my own technology companies are startups, and I won't call myself a successful commercial entrepreneur until I've made my fortune out of my technology startup. But it's one of those ideas that's very, very big. And a big idea is much harder to get the traction on in Australia than a small idea. So it's taken me a wee while. I suspect there's still a wee while ahead. But motivation, get right back to your question, is about change and getting things done that really matter and make a difference.
Can I ask, did you go looking for your big idea, or did your big idea come to you?
The big idea, my first big idea that we didn't get anywhere was actually the engine that would drive the Internet of Things. But it was before anybody talked about the Internet of Things. And so this next idea evolved out of that, saying, well, if people can't understand that, perhaps I'll understand something else. So it was an evolutionary process, but we basically conceived this need for an engine to drive the Internet of Things about 15 years ago.
Okay. So, Simone, I know that you've suggested that you started your business, it was a lifestyle need. Would that be right?
It's not a lifestyle need, it was more of a life-saving need. Yep. So I never really tell this story, but my little boy was very sick, and he's had a kidney transplant. So he was born in Alice Springs. He was flown to Adelaide for 6 months life-saving treatment. I had to live in a capital city for his treatment, so we then went to Brisbane, just purely because my husband could transfer his job from NT to Queensland. I was desperate to get back to Wagga just to have an easy life and not figure out where the shops were, and he had treatment every day. And then I got back to Wagga, and things were kind of a bit easier, and I thought, I'm going to open a cafe because, I like coffee and that would be fun. And, a bit crazy. I was going to have a cool drive-through cafe, and I thought Josh was about 3 when we went back to Wagga, and probably spent 80% of his time in hospital. So no one was ever going to give me a job because, if he got sick, it's weeks and months in hospital. I was going to open this cafe, and I spoke to my friend, and I'm like, you're going to build me this cool thing for my cafe? And he's like, ditch the cafe, we'll build the thing and we'll sell it to everyone. And that's what we did.
Okay. And the thing was?
365 cups. So it's a order ahead app. And it took about a year to build. We both met up at 9 o'clock every night online. Probably spent a year building it, not only building the app, but this is 2011, so this is donkey years ago in tech world. So we built the app, and we did. We were very serious. We did all of our protected all our IP, did our trademarks, did everything you need to do. We had our thing built, and we needed a customer. So the first person we went and saw, we showed them the system, and 2 days later they were live, and they're still with us today. Yeah.
And so at what point did you realise that you were actually a tech entrepreneur?
I think when I pitched at Fishburners, and I was in the bathroom vomiting before I had to pitch, and I was there and I was like, I'd never, because we were in Wagga and because we just had our, we were just doing our thing, so we just did our thing, we weren't really, and this is again 2011, so the ecosystem's changed so much since then. So when I was there and everyone's got their decks and they've got all these really cool graphics and stuff, and I've got pictures of cows in paddocks because we built an app for a co-op, and from that night I realised that was our point of difference, the regional story. I'm a born and bred Sydney girl, so I think it's quite funny when people freak out that we're from Wagga, because I'm like, I'm not getting on a train at 10 to 7 to go to work every day, so it just from that point on we kind of really embraced the whole the tech startup, and really kind of jumped into that whole community, and that, I guess, that community, when I pitched for Fishburners, I went on a program. It was to enter a program called Advance, which gave us an opportunity to go on a tour of Silicon Valley. And then I did that, and I think that really, again, going to the States just really opened my eyes. And then coming back, and then again just being really plugged into the ecosystem, getting support. I did the Springboard Accelerator as well. So from then on in, I was quite, through those programs, really out there and waving that flag of being a female entrepreneur or a tech startup, and really embracing that, which I think when you do programs like that, it lets you kind of step into that light, and that's really hard, I think, for a lot of, I think it's an Australian cultural thing, especially for women, this tall poppy, syndrome, it's ridiculous, but when people are there championing you, and then you can go on and champion others, that's the way to break down that barrier, I think.
Okay, Deborah. So I'd love to ask about, obviously, your time at Dell, where you did have the opportunity to work so closely with a lot of great Australian female entrepreneurs. Can I ask you, what were some of the key traits that you came across in those entrepreneurs that drove a lot of their success?
Dell created a global network focused on mid-tier entrepreneur female founders and leaders. And we had the opportunity in Australia to work with some amazing women. And these women, the traits, they were just fearless. Fear was not a barrier for them. They were jack of all trades. They were CEO, COO, CIO, CMO, executive of sales, but they had a true belief, and their purpose really, really drove them. And they had a true belief in what they had, and they also had an undying or an unwavering commitment to take what they developed here and take it to the rest of the world. So one of the advantages of Dell's network was that we could introduce, I shouldn't say we because I'm not there anymore, but Dell could introduce women to like-minded women and help them foster the key networks to establish that growth that they were looking for, either in Asia or in other parts of the world.
Okay. And did any of that, because I'd love to ask what you're doing now as well, because I've had the pleasure of interviewing you previously.
You have.
Obviously there's been a change. So has the entrepreneurial bug sort of rubbed off?
It has bitten a little bit, I have to say. It's an interesting, I'm in my 50s now, and I've been I was at Dell for 16 years, had a phenomenal career, and my last role was global. And And now I was very deliberate in retiring because my son is in his HSC year and I really wanted to be present for his last year of school. I'm a single parent as well. And now that I'm 6 months into this sabbatical, I've got all this experience and all this knowledge, and I'm a strong advocate for women, be it in an entrepreneurial sense or in, realising your dreams in the corporate world or aspirations in the corporate world. So this is where the entrepreneurial side is, and I'm sort of trying to figure out, I've got this idea, how do I create a business and really get it out there? So, yeah, but I'm not there yet. I'm still enjoying having a bit of time off.
Yeah, okay. All right, so Susan, I do need to ask you about this idea of, the fact that we have only 5% female investors, how we can possibly see more female investors in the future, and how we can really look at finding more opportunities for women to get in front of those investors as well.
Okay, that's absolutely the point of scale investors, so it's absolutely why we're there. I think our point of difference, and we recognise that there's great other organisations like Springboard, Topaz and Heads Over Heels and others, but they're working with the entrepreneurs to bring the entrepreneurs through. Not all entrepreneurs have got time, and we've already heard this morning your own story. It's hard for you to go to an incubator or an accelerator, and you probably won't enjoy the sort of dynamic of that. So there are entrepreneurs who are doing their work at the kitchen table with the kids in bed, and they're probably working as well. So we have an ability to capture and help those people through Laura's work, and so we work alongside of the springboards and the incubators, but that's one capture that we can do because we help them without sort of demanding that acceleration participation. But our real point of difference is that we encourage and train women to be great investors. And so we want our entrepreneurs to be rich and successful, and we want our investors to be really good at putting together a portfolio of investments and for them to make money out of it as well. And our experience is that successful entrepreneurs put money back in, so we need to build this intergenerational system which brings the knowledge and the money back into the other entrepreneurs. So that's an important reason why we have to be a sustainable, enduring organisation, not yet another blip on the historic chart of effort that you can see so often in Australia. And I think we've also, you touched on in your presentation, I think it was really great. When you're presenting as a female to an all-male audience, at that early stage, naturally you're saying, I get that bloke. I really understand him. I was like that when I was a young man, or I really understand that's the sort of people I work with. Now, women will do the same thing. So we can put women in front of women, so the pitching is a different process. It might be a little bit less sort of heroic in style, perhaps a little bit more aware of the risks, and there's other things that women, I think, characterise them without trying to be too general. And we women, as the audience for listening to them, are much more sensitive and aware and empathetic. So I think it's the right audience. We need to get women startup entrepreneurs in front of women investors, and women investors have to be knowledgeable and confident and competent and able to make those decisions well. So we run training and we learn by doing, and I think that it's really successful startup.
And at what level of investment do women come to you if they are looking to invest in?
Well, we encourage entrepreneurs in that first instance. All of the research says that you need money. If you're an entrepreneur, you need money. We also bring our that we're a very senior group, really, really fantastic diversity of skills, and we do have some men who are self-electing men who have joined us. We call them scale males. They don't like the name very well, but tough. And so, just give me my train again, sorry.
Oh, no, I wanted to see what level of investment you'd see female investors come to you with.
Okay, so we've made nearly $4 million of investments over 8 startups, so generally it's around 500,000. And it is that early stage just after relatives and family, friends. And so, again, that's a high risk, high return end of the spectrum. So understanding the risk and understanding how to put together a portfolio rather than just a single investment, all of those things are the sorts of skills that we teach and develop.
Okay, Simone, so what's it like being an entrepreneur in Wagga?
It's awesome.
So, is there a great network of people there? And
there is now. So we've, with my co-working space, so when we started, we were both had jobs, and then we gave up the jobs and we worked in a granny flat, and then I really wanted to move out and have some retail space in the CBD and have foot traffic. I didn't want to be in an office tucked away somewhere, so it's really exciting. I think I really love living in Wagga and the Riverina. Like I said, I grew up in Sydney, so it's really nice. It takes me 5 minutes to get to work and all of that, good stuff, no crazy commute to work. So it's tough though. So today in Wagga they're having an entrepreneur and innovation breakfast with our mayor and the GM of the council to really, we've really had to push for them to see the opportunity. Whereas I think from a lower level, there's lots of entrepreneurs, and I think the beauty about being in Wagga is that people just get on with it. And we've got a start-up in Wagga called Pop-Up Gigs that have they let venues list their shows, and they've got a ticketing system. We've got a start-up called Ag Tribe, which lets people, farmers share machine hire for dry hire. So I think a lot of people come to me, with incredible ideas, and through my network and through that ecosystem, we can then funnel them to the right people to, take that idea. And I think what we find in Wagga and in regional centres is we have a lot of incredibly talented women coming. They're partners of the defence partners, or they're partners of the doctors and the specialists that are coming to do their stint, and it's a very transient, they're only there for 2 or 3 years, and what we're seeing now is, they don't need to go work at Kmart. They can take their expertise in PR or event management and build an internet-based business that they can grow. They can start in Wagga, but they can service anyone, because when they up and move to their next town, it's not, they're not leaving and starting again. So that's the real opportunity, and we need that. We need women to start businesses because, we need that diversification of our local economies, and we need people that are brave enough to have ideas and solve our own problems that we have locally. That, the problems, if you talk about Sydney and Melbourne and all the startups, like it's really buzzing now, and that's awesome, but the problems we have in regional centres, and if you talk of some of the other co-working spaces around regional centres, their opportunities aren't, it might be in tourism or especially in food for regional centres. So there's so much opportunity, and I think we're kind of starting to see that now, and it's just one of those things. If you can see it, you can do it, and if more people are doing it, and they think, well, I can do that too, and I don't have to go and join an accelerator or an incubator in Sydney, or because they've got wives and children. They can, and because of technology, we can plug into that and be a part of that ecosystem without having to go back and forth to Sydney or Melbourne to attend an event.
Yeah, so more emphasis on the opportunities in regional areas, particularly for tech startups, which make a lot of sense, where you can have your lifestyle and you can obviously be close to your work as well. Yeah,
I think when we started, there was a lot of, our system is highly evolved now, but we could literally walk around the corner and be with our clients, and we could be talking to them. When our first client, the first week, I just sat in the cafe, and everyone that walked in the door, I put the app on their phone and I showed them how to use it. I don't think that would go down too well in a busy cafe in Sydney or Melbourne. So, it was very different, and we have people, we're really plugged in and connected. So we're not sitting up in an office far away from, everything is about our users, and we're really connected to them. I can go to the post office and people will come up and tell me how much, they love the app and all of that stuff. So we're really connected to our users, and I think that's a big part to our success, because everything we've developed within our system is just based on what our users wanted. And we thought it was pretty cool, like to order coffee from your phone, and so many other people did as well, and that's what it started out as. But it also turned into a really great workflow solution for the cafes, and then it turned into, well, I don't want to be on an app with everyone else, I want my own app. So we made a branded app. So everything that has evolved has been based on our users, and I think we've got a lot of users in Wagga, a lot of our early adopters, and I think learning as well, we've got a lot of regional uptake, and I was saying this earlier, because a lot of the cafes in regional centres are owner-operators, so they have to be, they have to compete, and I think a lot of people in regional areas are very tech savvy, because they have to be, because they can't just go to H&M, they've got to buy it online, like we're not isolated geographically anymore, because thanks to technology. So it's a very big mindset, and I think people in any regional centre, like I said before, they just kind of get on with it and just do it, and not really fuss about what's going on in Sydney, because they just do their thing, and if they want something online, they just get it, and that's it.
So Deborah, we have talked about, obviously this can be quite a male-dominated industry for a lot of women, and we talked about the issue of confidence and how it might be difficult to be confident in a room full of men. I'd love you to draw on your own experience, obviously working in a male-dominated industry, particularly from quite a young age, and particularly with a young family as a single parent. Did you find working in Dell, was it ever a lonely experience, or what did you find could really help in that sense?
Look, at times, yes. The early part of my career, when you're in a junior leadership role, you have a lot of female peers. Now, Dell has been an advocate for many years around diversity and inclusion. So there are a number of programs that was ingrained in our culture. But as you climbed, the corporate ladder, I suppose, it did become extremely, extremely lonely. But the way I approached it was I wanted to balance my priority for my family and my desire to fulfill my career aspirations with, being in a room full of, men, right? And you just have to walk in there and feel that you are no different, that you may speak a different language, you may look different, but I have to trust that the men that I was working with did respect my opinion. So I worked very, very hard to gain that respect and trust. And I suppose that's all been fostered from when I was very, very young, because my dad, really, I thank my dad for why I have been able to achieve what I've achieved. Because at a very young age, I would sit around the kitchen table with him. He was an engineer with the radio physics division, and he was part of the team that built the Australian telescope out at Parkes, in the movie The Dish. And we would sit there and I would solder bits and bobs onto motherboards. Right? I had no idea what I was doing, and he would sit there and he would just say to me, "Deb, you can be anything you want to be." That was all he ever said. He never got into diversity or agenda. Those words probably weren't around then. But, and that sort of, that constant reinforcement about being what I wanted to be, I think has helped me through my time in the IT industry. But what I think is also really important is, as a female leader in that industry, is we have a responsibility to really put our hands down and pull the up-and-coming leaders in that industry up. And look, it probably doesn't just apply to IT, I think it's all industries.
Yeah, but not all women, I guess, have that experience of being told that they can be anything they want to be, or having the experience of being able to work with motherboards and things like that. And I mean, one thing I find particularly sad is that we're actually seeing women studying maths in high school, that the rate of women studying maths in high school is actually going backwards from 10 years ago. So, I mean, I'd love to ask maybe everyone's ideas on this. In tech, in entrepreneurship, do we need to change our language? Do we need to change? I mean, Jo Burson often tells a story about how when she went into high schools and asked who an entrepreneur is, that a lot of the kids would say, well, Mark Zuckerberg. So, you know, hoodie wearing, late 20s geek person, that was their idea of an entrepreneur. And it's a little bit, what's going on that we're not pulling out female examples?
Look, I think there is an opportunity to go into the schools. Absolutely. When I was working with Dell, we had a program that we developed out of Ireland, and it was voluntary, but we created this education program called IT is Just Not for Geeks. Because I think when you look at technology is an enabler of our businesses, whatever industry you're in, right? And it's a small percentage of the employee or the employees are a small percentage that are really into the bits and the bytes and the programming or the development. And the purpose of this program, and I think Ahmed talked about something similar for Australia Post, was to educate especially young girls before they started to select their electives that technology enables you to have an outstanding career in marketing, an outstanding career in public relations, an outstanding career in finance, sales, whatever you sort of choose to, your discipline may be or your passion may be. And so I think we get ourselves caught up in this tech startup. You know, it's not, technology is an enabler. It's not to me, it's not the end game, if that makes sense.
And did you have any views on that, about the language that we use for entrepreneurs?
We had the experience recently. Now, I'm a country girl, and so I'm very sympathetic around opportunities in regional Australia. So Scale is making an effort to work with one of the regional finance organisations with the view that we can actually create lots of mini-scale cells and work together collaboratively, and perhaps we should talk about that. And as we were talking, and I know Laura and myself and Lynn, another colleague in the room, were talking about startups, and we weren't saying tech startups. We're not tech startups only. Certainly there are some, but that's not what we're on about. And somebody from that particular organisation said, I'm having trouble with your language. And I said, well, I'd really like to know what language. You know, I didn't think I'd sworn, but I did start in the construction industry, so I might have. They slip out sometimes, usually when my mum's there. And so what language? And startup, making money, you know, the language that we use confidently. And my reply to that is, we have to use that language. That young woman well, I don't think she was young, but that woman in Bendigo that was starting a chocolate shop, she's a startup. Let's call her a startup and let's encourage her to be part of the conversation. And this issue of talking and of the role models is also really important. And what I believe we've done at Scale is hopefully we've moved the dial from the 5%, Laura, because we've got 95 angels and about 70-something of them are women, so I think we've moved the dial. But let's have a conversation out there in company director land and in you know, you're entrepreneurs or investors or part of the scene here, but the conversation is still very narrow here. And let's have the conversation in every country town, and let's call them startups, and let's start talking about making money, and let's have an International Women's Day where we don't nominate somebody who's got a philanthropic or charitable set of achievements. Let's get out there and say money's good, because we'll make money and then we'll reinvest and we'll start thinking about how we're part of the agenda, and let's start using that language. And I know Sarah's here from Google and you're working in schools, and I'm sure that you're moving the dial on the language in schools. So I think it's, you know, I'm really very, very conscious of getting the conversation into company director land. I think that's really important, because if we don't have good marketplace, if we don't have a good customer base for our invention and entrepreneurial activity in this country, then it's all going to go overseas, it's all going to leak. So part of the system, part of the conversation has to be the courage, the confidence and the competence of corporates to buy our own inventions and our own entrepreneurs. Then we'll make great companies and we'll have the next Google and the next Microsoft or whatever else. But currently we've got a disjointed, not fully functioning, and I think getting some language and getting some excitement and getting that conversation right out through society and country, Australia, should be our mission.
And I'd love to ask about the idea of scale as well. I mean, obviously that's in your business name, but so Lauren Hall often talks about this idea that she wants to be the first $1 billion exit. And I just love the confidence, and I love that she uses the word billion. And, I love that she stands up and says that, and that she has this scalable idea. I will say that we ran a pitching competition a few years ago, and one of the disappointing factors in that was that a lot of the entries that came through weren't particularly scalable. And I didn't know why. I wasn't sure if it was the language that we used in the competition, or if it was because we're aiming particularly at young women or something. But do we need to try and encourage more ideas around something scalable? And I know that, you've particularly had your own experience of this. You mentioned that you wanted to start as a drive-through, and obviously you've done something with so much more potential beyond that.
I think scale's interesting. Obviously you're a business, you've got to make money. Especially if you're not funded. And I think the conversation needs to be about having a viable business as well. Like you said before, you want to see the next female Atlassian. We've already got that with Canva, I think. So, and if you look at scale, but Canva's, on their second, they had an online book. I don't know what the name of it is. So I think it's not about scale, it's about starting, because you might start and you might fail miserably, and we're having this conversation that's okay now, but you might start this thing and you're like, this is going to be awesome, and nothing happens with it, but then that will be, you take those learnings, or you take that chunk, that engine, and that then pivots into this thing. So I think scale is, there, but I think we need to kind of start with just starting. And when we talk about school kids, and not about, we could talk all day about these kind of weird labels we give each other. One of the startups in my co-working space, I printed her out a certificate, and I said, you're a startup, you're an entrepreneur, signed by Simone, there you go. Like, just leave the labels behind and just build your business. And, the school kids don't need to, need this kind of moonshot ideas, but kids don't need to leave school anymore and go to university for 4 years and then become a nurse. Like, they can leave school, they can be at school, and they can have a startup. And that's kind of what I think we need to be encouraging more of. And yes, we have this conversation, tech startup or a startup, like, who cares? As long as you're doing something. If you're, like, I look at everything, I say to everyone, problem, solution. What's the problem? I had a problem. I needed coffee fast. I've got a kid, and I've always bought coffee. Yeah. And a lot of people have that problem. Yeah. And there's a lot of auto head apps now. But that's okay, because we've built a viable business, and we're not going to crash and burn because, a competitor's going to eat us up. Like, we've got a very different business model, and we do a lot of other things behind the scenes that isn't out there. But, we've got a viable business, and and now with a co-working space, and there's a few other things I'm building, what took me 5 years to figure out, I've implemented on day one in my next and third and fourth thing that I'm building. And I think that's, it'd be nice to have, if you look at any of them, like Elon Musk, all of them, they're on their second, third, fourth crack at having a go at something. And I think, we've got to kind of remove the barrier of, you don't need to be an entrepreneur or a tech startup or, in Sydney CBD to have a go. And I think that's really where we need to kind of remove all those barriers, remove all those labels. And if you've got an idea, if you've got a problem solution, go to the network and go, who's out there, who's done that, who can help me, and ask them to help you, and just go ahead and do it.
Okay, so I've been told we've got 5 more minutes, so I might actually throw it to the audience to see if anybody has any burning questions they'd like to ask. Yes.
Angela, have you seen a change in the language, the types of questions that people are asking or articles that people are writing on women's agenda over the last 4 or 5 years as we are broadening out this conversation around women as investors and entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so I've definitely seen a lot more around money. You know, that it's okay, let's talk about money, let's talk about the ambition of making money, let's talk about scale, which I guess is where that question that I asked just came from as well. So previously, I guess there's been a lot around finding your purpose, which I feel can be a little bit too soft sometimes, which is obviously great if you have that purpose. But I actually really like to see when women are talking about something beyond that, that it's, well, I'm finding an answer to a problem that a lot of people are having. That might not be your overall purpose. Your purpose might be to actually create a great life for yourself and your family and to support your kids. It's not necessarily about the business that you're running. So I think that's where we're seeing the conversation shift a little bit, and this idea that that's okay. In fact, that's actually great to do that. More questions? Yeah.
For Simone, directly. Knowing where you are now, if you went back to where you actually originally started, what would you tell yourself, or what would you change about where you're at, or what would what were the messages you would like to give yourself?
I'm never one to think of what ifs or to go back, but I think that day at Fishburners I wouldn't have been vomiting in the bathroom. I would have been out networking. I think, I feel really humbled to be here, and sometimes I pinch myself, that it was just a really simple idea, but I had the nous to actually do it. So many people, I think it was said earlier, my new favourite thing, ideas are so easy and everyone's got great ideas and everyone's going to publish a book and then you're going to have a kid and have a kid's book. That's easy, but execution, and when you start, you have no idea what you're doing, and that's okay too, because I say to people, we're a startup, we didn't know what it was, and I also say a lot of things we do don't make sense, but that's why it works, because, we're not 9 to 5 and have... it's a very fluid, especially in tech, it's very fluid, and it's all about the end user. So, I think, no vomiting in the toilets, and probably moved out of the granny flat a bit earlier too, because that was when we kind of got out of the kitchen or the spare room. Like a lot of people, I think that leap actually drove us more because, we were out there and you can't fail. You've got rent to pay. It's a very different aspect to your business. So it just changed the dynamic and the drive, I think.
So we had 2 questions, so I'll get you both to ask them at the same time, and then we can, because we've only got a couple of minutes left. So.
My question relates specifically to identity, because myself and my co-founder were both quite young female entrepreneurs, and we've been getting a lot of conflicting advice from a lot of male mentors about how we should present ourselves, especially because we're at a stage that we need to start asking for money. But we're finding such a disconnect in the way that they say, just go in and start selling aggressively. We tried that once and it just was not for us. It's really uncomfortable going forward as a woman doing that. So I was just wondering to you guys, and probably a lot of the women in the room, how do you go about being a woman and having to display masculine tendencies in order to get money, to talk about money, and to be kind of say, this is what I want to do, without coming across as a bitch, really?
Yeah. Okay, so hold that one, and I'll just get this question as well, so we can answer them both at the same time.
And related to that,
actually,
was also around female identity. So it seems like we have this concept of, the female identity and then the business world, and we're trying to blend the two of them together. And I'm interested to hear which one you think will give more, which one will give way more. Are we trying to make women fit into a current male paradigm of a business world, or are we trying to change the business world to actually be more female and have a bit more diversity in that? Which one are we actually moving towards?
Okay, they're great questions. Yeah.
Well, I'll start and I'll be brief so everybody else can talk. I think you have to do both. And I empathise. I walk into a room to pitch and I'm soft-spoken and I'm clearly not 23-year-old pimply youth and a geek. So yes, but I have to be sincere, and sincerity is really important, and honesty, and your call on the risks that are associated with it. And I suggest you talk to Laura, because Laura is doing this all the time. So we'd be very happy to help. But we do have to change the receptivity too. And I think that's really what Ahmed was talking about this morning. It's what we're doing in putting together a cohort of investors to listen to those stories and to understand them. So I don't think you can just say, let's change one, but let's get the whole system working so that it's supportive.
For the pitching, I think, again, there's this notion that pitching's fun and you go to a cool pitching night and pitch. Like, pitching is the hardest thing you'll ever do. And what's worse is not only will you find these kind of barriers that come up, you'll pitch and you'll get this advice, and then you'll change your deck and you'll pitch again, and those people will go, your pitch should have been like everything you originally had. Like, it's the worst thing. And Rebecca too from Posse, like, you know, her story of pitching, how many times she pitched, and even Melanie from Canva, she was in the Valley for 3 years pitching for Canva. So don't be disheartened. Like, you need to, going back, I would say enjoy the journey, you know, like it's crazy, but, you know, every time you pitch and get knocked back and you get feedback, you need to know your why and your mission, and, you know, don't change it for anyone else, and then you'll come across the right person that will be your potential investor. So enjoy that journey, but don't be disheartened by it. It's hard. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do. I think pitching, it's awful. And then back to the business, I think you need both as well. I think if this probably won't answer it, but I think a lot of people that have just had a baby and they're a startup or they have a business, you know, I think they're just at a time in their life where they're just going to have a go because they can, because they have to. For whatever reason, they have a great idea, and I think especially a lot of, you know, new mums, you know, when they were talking before about, or single parents or whatever, they've got nothing to lose, so they just go for it. And I think that's where you see the success of especially women. And I think, you know, that mindset's changing, and it's changing really fast. If you think, you know, I was with my husband's grandma who's 95, and she was telling this story, and she said, unfortunately, I wasn't lucky enough to go to high school. Like, that's only 70 years ago. You know, imagine not being able to go to high school because you have to go and work out in the field and do like hard labour. So, you know, things are changing a lot rapid now, and days like today will help change that and encourage that change as well.
As a woman, what's your best piece of advice to men about how they can adapt to the environment or be conscious of when they're in the room so that they don't feel uncomfortable?
I think you've got to be mindful of your language and the way you have a conversation. It is a boys' club, and look, I love my football and I love my sports, and, you know, I play rugby union, so it's real good. Okay, but it's just to, you know, you're there to talk about business. It's one thing to have great camaraderie and, you know, blokes are together, and it's I don't know quite how to articulate this. It's just keep it level. Be respectful of the language, using the right language about the business, and not isolate or discuss or speak in such a way that a woman in a room cannot be part of the conversation. As a female executive, I learnt the hard way. I didn't want to modify who I was. I wanted to stay feminine. I wanted to like the things that I liked. And I know men might not necessarily be interested in that, and I'm not necessarily interested in what they find outside of business, you know, interesting. But you just have to find that common ground. And I think when you're part of an executive team, that comes over time. So hopefully that helps.
With that, I might jump up and wrap up our panel. Can you please join with me in thanking Susan, Simone, Deborah and Angela?